According to the U.S. Census Bureau, roughly 301 million people reported having an anxiety disorder. Join us today as we discuss generalized anxiety disorder and how Miss Toni is recovering, how she's coping, and how she's invited the Lord into her journey as she deals with generalized anxiety disorder. Stay tuned. Before we get into part one of this episode today, I want to let you know that for the month of May, for Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm giving away my book, my workbook called Unashamed for free. That's right, you heard it. It is free. This book is amazing. I have received so much great feedback on it, and it really helped so many people to become unashamed of their past mistakes, unashamed of their mental health, unashamed of different areas of their lives. I have presented this workshop so many times in different areas and different sectors about becoming unashamed of your mental health. So be sure to go to the description box and download your free book. Welcome everyone to the Faith and Mental Wellness Podcast. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Miss Toni Wortherly. She is a multi-talented artist hailing from Jacksonville, Florida. As a dynamic singer, songwriter, accomplished author, engaging speaker, and dedicated educator, Toni's life is centered around her profound relationship with Jesus Christ. Through her original music, compelling writing, and inspirational speaking engagements, she embodies the richness of this connection, spreading hope and encouragement. Toni is passionate about engaging with girls and women on topics about mental health and wellness, navigating the journey of singleness, and redefining life after divorce. Her mission is rooted in sharing the boundless love of Christ Jesus with humility while authentically shining his light with unwavering integrity. Welcome, Miss Toni, to the Faith and Mental Wellness Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And my apologies that my cat is constantly trying to steal the spotlight.
So it's okay.
she just ran across the table. I don't even know if you noticed, but it's all good.
I have a dog.
She is my emotional support animal. Yeah. So she was like, I want to tell my story, Mama.
Right. It's okay. It's fine. We have a dog here, but he's downstairs. And my door's closed. So otherwise, he will be at my feet begging for me to pick him up. So I understand. Awesome. So today's topic, you guys, is about generalized anxiety disorder. And Miss Toni wants to share with us about her story and her journey about anxiety. So before we begin, Miss Toni, can you share in your own words what generalized anxiety disorder actually is?
So generalized anxiety disorder is a mental health condition. We all experience some level of anxiety and stress. Everybody goes through it. Public speaking, it's one of the main things that gets our heartbeat pumping real fast. If you have any kind of like financial crisis that happens, if you have a relationship issue, even good things sometimes cause anxiety. Like I was sharing with you before we got on that my nephew is having a baby, and that there's good anxiety and good stress, and there's bad anxiety and bad stress. So with generalized anxiety disorder, what happens is your brain kind of takes that normal anxiety that everybody has and it just exacerbates it. Catastrophizes, makes things worse, sees things as really, really horrible things that happen. So it takes something very small and kind of snowballs it into something that's much bigger. And so that's a very intense feeling that causes a lot of fear, a lot of dread, and sometimes it lasts longer than the thing that triggered it. And so it's a very confusing place to be. I was so blessed, once it might sound crazy, but I was blessed to have a diagnosis and to finally know like what that was. I really just thought like I don't know. I don't even know what I thought before that, but I just, I was called a worry wart, and, people were just like, oh, you just worry too much. And I just thought I was so different than everybody. God gave me a big, beautiful brain with a big imagination. Unfortunately, sometimes that imagination was turning on me. So when I got my diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, it put things into perspective that at points in my life, there is a chemical imbalance in my brain that can cause me to kind of veer off of the reality train and go into this series of thoughts and fears and anxieties that kind of paralyzes me. It just makes me fearful to live almost. In some instances where it's gotten really bad, I have considered taking myself out. And it's not a place that you want to be mentally, but like knowing what it is helps you get on the path to recovery. So the difference between regular anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder is the intensity of the anxiety and the duration of the anxiety and the fact that it actually affects your ability to just live your life.
Oh wow. Thank you for explaining it in your own words because as a person who has it, for those who are listening and experiencing what you're experiencing, I'm sure they can relate to it because I feel like oftentimes the clinical explanation is there, but hearing it from a person who actually has it makes it a lot more relatable because you can read about something in clinical terms, right? But it's still not fully resonate with you. And so my hope and prayer today is that as you share some of your story and your journey, that the people who are listening will be able to pull from, from you and pull from your story and will say, you know what, that's me. It's okay to go get help. It's okay to, love God and know that, okay, I'm dealing with this. It is okay.
Mhm.
And so with
Mhm.
that being said, like okay, so prior to your diagnosis, what were you aware that something was like different? Did anything like trigger you to have different emotions that you found that was like, wow, this is something that's not right here?
Yeah, so I often tell people my earliest memory, the earliest memory that I can think of, I can't remember if I was like 3 or 4, but I was pretty little. And we live in Florida, and I think it was probably hurricane season. My sister, my mom, and I were in the house. I remember that very vividly. I remember it was storming outside. We were all a little shaken by that, but I remember being in absolute terror, dread that the house was going to cave in, that the water was going to come through the windows, that it was going to flood, and that we were going to like float off into oblivion. Like I remember that very distinctly as a memory. And that's going all the way back to when I was just like a toddler, like a little kid. Okay.
Wow, that is an early
So
memory.
that is,
Wow.
yes, that is, I think that's either my earliest or one of my earliest memories that's still just like implanted on my brain. And just throughout my childhood, adolescence, teenage years, I did notice that I tended to be more uptight, more worried, more concerned about things than other people my age. But I really noticed when I got to college. And the thing that I noticed when I got to college was I would be sitting in my room and I would be thinking about missing my family or assignments that were due and be laying in my bed and I would feel like I was having a heart attack. And my chest would get tight and it would be hard to breathe and all of these things. Well, I didn't realize until probably, I don't know, 10 years later that that's called a panic attack. So I
Yes,
was
it's like a
having,
heart attack. When I hear the word heart
yes.
attack from a person, it's like, yes, it's definitely linked to having a panic attack. Hmm.
So I was having these, and the crazy part is that no, I should probably stop using the word crazy, but the strange part of it, now that I look back as an adult, is I went through that stuff alone. I did not tell people what was happening in those moments when I felt like my heart was racing and couldn't stop, or my chest was hurting, or I couldn't catch my breath, I didn't tell people. I would just like lay there in my bed in my dorm room and take it, or sit in my apartment when I got to my next school and just like take it and like just power through, right? Because I didn't want anybody to see me as weak. And so I kind of put on like a facade. In my teenage years, I was more like, um, well, actually, I should say my preteen years, I was more like shy. My self-esteem was a little bit lower, but in my teenage years and my early adult years, rather than show people like how I felt like I was breaking up kind of inside, I put on this facade that I had everything together. And I could cover up all that anxiety by portraying myself as a perfectionist. So people just looked at it like, oh, she's just trying to like, achieve a bunch of things, and she's trying, and that's why she's like uptight like this, and not not the fact that like my mind was going a million miles a minute. I was having trouble sleeping. I was having trouble concentrating. I was having what I now know to be panic attacks, and just trying to make it through. And it wasn't necessarily at that time anything big, so to speak, that was triggering it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Hey, a quick break. So, I wanted to let you know that I also have a quiz called How High is Your Anxiety? So, if you are trying to figure out where you are when it comes to your anxiety levels, visit the description box to take the free quiz. The link will be in there just for you. Also, I have a course to help life coaches and therapists and also Christian leaders to truly help other people to work through their anxiety and to identify what the different types of anxiety actually is. There are so many types, and so today we're only talking about generalized anxiety disorder. In addition to that, if you're a person who wants to really work on your anxiety and you don't have time to go to therapy or even afford to go to therapy at this time, you can also purchase that course as well for a very reasonable rate.
So fast forward a little bit. So what year were you diagnosed with GAD? That's the short for generalized anxiety disorder.
So when I was in law school, my second year of law school,
Wow.
in 2001, I got divorced in the summer of 2001, after my first year of law school. And the fall semester of law school, 9/11 happened.
Mm.
Um, there was just a lot of things going on,
Mhm.
and it was law school. So
Yeah.
just kind of stressed out. I also realized halfway through law school that this career that I had told everybody I was going to have and that I had wanted to do for most of my life, I realized that it was not for me,
Mhm.
but I needed to finish. One, because I had told everyone that I was going to do it, and two, because I had a scholarship that was dependent on me graduating and practicing law for 3 years. So I was trying to figure out how I was going to accomplish all of
Mhm.
that. I very not unwisely entered immediately into another relationship that was very
Mhm.
toxic and rocky.
Mhm.
And so that new relationship that I was in, he and I had planned for spring break that he was going home and I was going to meet my family, and we were going to meet somewhere in the middle and hang out for a while. And so I was driving and trying to figure out where he was. He didn't answer, and so I'm calling and I'm calling and I'm calling and I'm calling. Called the house, called the cell phone, trying to figure out. So immediately my mind went to he's in a ditch somewhere because he got a car accident and now he's dead. And I've got to figure out where he is, and
Damn.
I got to figure out where he was, and I got to find him. So I didn't realize until his roommate picked up the phone and was like, stop calling. Stop calling here. He's not here. Stop calling. I'm trying to sleep. Stop calling. And then the next day, he did call me, and I had called him probably 50 plus times. And I had no idea I had called him that many times.
Your
I
anxiety had
just
got
was
so high. Yes.
I
was in
completely just
overdrive.
blanked out. I was just in a
Mm-hmm.
loop. I was just in a loop
Mm-hmm.
and trying to break that loop, waiting for him to answer the phone.
Yes.
And so we got into an argument and he called me crazy, and that like really hit me. And so I had already been seeing a therapist because of the things that had happened in my marriage and going through the divorce. So I was already seeing a therapist. And so I told my therapist when I got back about that. And I will never forget my therapist's face while I was telling him the story, because we had talked about a lot of things, but I don't think anything, I had had any real like episodes that were this intense and or talked about them that were in our sessions. And so he looked at me when I finally stopped talking and said, I'm going to refer you to a psychotherapist because I think that you have generalized anxiety disorder. And I think that we need to get you on some sort of medication to get you back on track. So I went to see the psychotherapist. She confirmed that diagnosis after, filling out paperwork and interviewing and talking about all the different things that I talk about now that have happened over my lifetime. She explained to me what it was. She explained to me that she wanted to put me on medication to kind of get that balance back in my brain, get those levels back right. So I went on medication for a while, and then I was able to wean off of it. I was still going through therapy. And then when I got to the end of law school and studying for the bar and practicing for the bar exam and doing all of that, things started to get bad again because I was stressed out. And on top of that stress, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a job. I didn't want to take a job with a firm because I didn't want to get stuck there, because I knew that's what I didn't want. I didn't want to do that with my life. So I went back on medication again for a period of time. And I've done both. I've done medication and I've done cognitive behavioral therapy. But like I said before, that diagnosis changed my life because it gave meaning to what was going on. It wasn't just that I was a worrywart that didn't trust God, because I've been a Christian since I was 6 years old. I got saved and baptized when I was 6 years old. And I've heard my whole entire life, be anxious for nothing. And that haunted me because I felt like I was letting God down constantly all the time because I was anxious about everything all the time. And so having a diagnosis was a blessing to me because it showed me this is not normal and you're not causing this. And it's treatable. And there are things that you can do. I tell people all the time, I believe in Jesus and therapy.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Listen, I can relate to your story so much. Now, I talked about this before on my other platforms, but I was diagnosed with GAD probably about 12, 13 years ago. And I knew I had a history of trauma and I dealt with the trauma, but I still had the anxiety from my trauma. And so my anxiety lied within fear of poverty, because I had came from a background, a childhood where we had a lot of poverty. So I was working like a lot, like working, even though I'm married now, awesome husband, awesome provider. But I felt like I need to have like 2 or 3 jobs just to continue to bring in income. So I wanted to go see a therapist because during that time, my husband was overseas and I had 2 daughters and I was overwhelmed. I was working part-time. And so I said, you know what? Let me go see a therapist. At this time, I was doing therapy with other people, but it wasn't outpatient therapy. It was more like community therapy. So we're doing more like community resources, linking it with appropriate things. So I really wasn't doing a whole bunch of anxiety work, but more like coping skills, right? And my therapist said, Shakita, she said, I'm diagnosing you with GAD. I said, do what now? You gonna diagnose me with what? And I remember I had prayed, and mind you, just like you said, I love God, I love Jesus, and I had an amazing relationship with God. And my prayer was, God, show her my blind spots, show her areas in my life where I'm not privy to, or I'm not seeing because something's not right. Something's just not right. And my God, He answered my prayer. And so when I left there, I said, God, is she right? He said, she's 100% right. She's 100% right. And so I had to really dig deep and get to do my work and coping skills and understand my triggers and really allow God and, my therapist too, to really do a deep dive into my thought process. Right? Okay, Shakita, all right. What are you doing now that's leading you to be ruminating, right? When you're thinking in your head over and over and over and over again about a problem that you can't even solve.
Yep.
Outside of your control. So I understand. I get exactly what you're saying. And people who don't experience that have a hard time understanding that. But it happens. Anything can trigger it. Everybody's journey and story is unique to them. Right. You mentioned earlier about when you were a child and how you remember, with the hurricane coming. So you had this fear of like, oh my God, we're going to be homeless. We're going to be out here somewhere floating around with nowhere to go.
Floating around.
Yeah, that would give anybody, any child anxiety. And and then over time, well, I've learned too, some clients I had before in the past who had GAD as well, is that like you said, like something can happen at work to trigger their anxiety. And let's say their boss, had to ask them to do a task. And they would think of 1,001 things that would go wrong if they did that one task and it wasn't done correctly. And I'm like, your boss isn't asking you to do it perfectly. She's asking you to just do this one task. Just do it. If it's wrong, I'm sure she'll let you know. So we do a whole lot of work of what if. Okay, what if it do happen? Then what? Okay. All right. What if it does happen? Okay, so we have to do a lot of what if, what if, what if, what if. I'm like, we're thinking the worst case scenario. And so for me, my worst case scenario was that I'm gonna be broke. I ain't gonna be able to pay my bills. I'm not gonna be able. So that was my worst case scenario. And so really it wasn't there was no, I won't say there was like no validity to it, but the likelihood that happening was like slim to none.
Right. Right.
Yes. Hey, you guys, I am so excited. Okay. I have been so busy, but I had to announce that I have 3 different books that just came out, and they're all for Christian college students. So whether they are going to a secular school and they are Christians, or they're attending a Christian college, university, or community college, then I have some great information and great things for them. The first thing I have is a workbook to help Christian college students to overcome anxiety. Not just plain anxiety, but the different types of anxiety. This is a workbook full of tools, assessments, and resources, okay, that will help them tremendously. I wish I had this kind of workbook whenever I was in college. Then I also have a prayer devotional for Christian college students. It is amazing. It is robust. It's a daily prayer, short prayer for them to really tackle the areas they may deal with as a Christian college student. And then I have a journal called Cast Your Cares on Christ or on Jesus, okay? It's a journal that Christian college students can use to just write how they're feeling. It has journal prompts in it. It has different things that you need to know about journaling and how to incorporate that into your life. So be sure to go to the description box to look at those books. I pray that it will help you. Please share with those you think may need this. And again, thank you so much for being here and being a part of the Faith and Mental Wellness podcast community.
I think at the beginning of my therapy journey, it was mostly focused on coping as opposed to actually figuring out why it was happening. That didn't happen until my therapist that I just met last September.
Yeah.
He took me on that journey of like uncovering and doing the uncomfortable work.
Yes.
Where I had to actually sit in my thoughts and analyze my thoughts. For a person with anxiety, thinking about what you're thinking about is scary.
Yeah.
I don't like being in my head. I don't often sit in
Mm-hmm.
silent rooms. I try to make sure that there's noise everywhere. I don't sit in the car in silence because my brain will take hold of a thought, like you said, like
Yeah.
at work. Like, I need no
Yeah.
one who is my administrator to come to me and say, I need to talk to you without telling me exactly why they need to talk to me. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you say a sentence like, I need to talk to you to
Mm-hmm.
someone with a brain like mine,
Mm-hmm.
I am going to, as much as I would love to think of all of the wonderful things that you want to say to me, my
Mm-hmm.
brain would like to think of all of the worst possible scenarios that could
Mm-hmm.
happen. I'm getting fired. Somebody lied on me. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
said that I did something I didn't do, or I did something and it was wrong and I didn't know. Like,
Yeah.
it goes on and on and on. That ruminating is no joke. My
Mm-hmm.
um most recent therapist actually made me sit in that, which was so
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
actually. And he would say, "What are you thinking?" And I would say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't tell
Yes.
him, "What are you
Yeah.
thinking? What are you thinking right now? What are you
Yeah.
feeling?" And
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to talk about what I'm thinking about
Yeah.
because it's it's bad. And
Mm-hmm.
it's and I don't want to even, like,
Yeah.
faith, biblically speaking, or as a person of faith speaking, I don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
there's the power of death and life in the tongue. So I don't want to say the things out loud that
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that are horrible because I don't want to give the
Yeah.
enemy a foothold. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Because we're taught that,
so
right? We taught, don't say
actually,
that.
like,
Yes.
expressing the nastiness and the weirdness and the,
Mm-hmm.
like, catastrophes that my brain is processing
Mm-hmm.
and actually saying that out loud, I was like,
Mm.
I don't want to tell you what is in my brain because, first of all, you're going to be like, girl,
Mm-hmm.
why? Why
Mm-hmm.
are you even going there? Like, we're not even,
Mm-hmm.
you're on step Z and we haven't even gotten past A. Like, what are you?
Right. I get what you're
But
saying.
yeah,
Yeah. So have you had a chance to debunk some of those thoughts and some of those myths?
I have. So
Good.
that's where
Good.
I am now. And then honestly,
Yes.
that's why I'm on this part of my journey where I'm trying to talk to as many people as I can. I'm not an expert, I'm not a therapist. I am on the side of this is my experience in my life.
Yes.
And I didn't
Absolutely.
know this was possible. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that help was possible because, like I said, my therapist that diagnosed me, he
Mm-hmm.
was just trying to get me back right in that moment. And for which I
Yeah.
thank him. And I thank him
Yeah.
for helping me understand that there was something deeper going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then anytime after that, where I would have an episode where I needed help, it was just about getting through that
Yeah.
season of crisis.
Yeah.
But it was never about actually um, dealing with the underlying issues that were
Get to
causing
the
it,
root of it.
getting to
Exactly.
the root of it and doing the
Yes.
work.
Yes.
And the ironic part is this time when I found my therapist, he was like, "What are your goals?" Insomnia is one of my symptoms. I know
Mm.
that I am anxious about a lot of things, and it's
Yeah.
hard to
And it's
settle.
exhausting. I remember going through
And
those
yes,
episodes. Absolutely.
it's definitely a
Yes.
journey. When I went into my therapist this time, I was like, I just want to sleep and I
Hmm.
just want to not be anxious. And so
Hmm.
if you can, like, write me a prescription
Yeah.
that will help me sleep
Yeah.
and or get rid of this anxiety that I'm
Yeah.
dealing with, that would be
Yeah.
great. And he looked
Yeah.
at me and he said, I had another client who just wanted me to get rid of all the parts of her that she didn't like. And I looked at her and said, if that's what you want, you need to find another therapist. And I was like, so no prescription. That's what we're like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not what we're doing this time.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna actually have to, like, talk about things and
Yeah.
like I thought
Yeah.
I could just like tell you enough for you to be like, yep, she needs some help.
Yeah.
And then I get my prescription and be on my merry way. But
Yeah.
instead, we ended up doing some very hard work, hard
Mm-hmm.
for me, hard for him because I made it hard on him. I
Yeah.
left just about every session, and I'd call my mom after the session and be like, "Do you know what he said to me?" Like, and
Yes.
it was hard. It was some days when I wanted to be like, you know what, I'm through with you. But
Mm-hmm.
my sister is a therapist, and so I
Mm-hmm.
would tell her, be like, and then I said, and then he said, and she's like, oh, I like him. I like him.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, but that's what I prayed for. I was like, Lord, I need to find a therapist because I had another one a couple of
Yeah.
years prior, and it was a
Yeah.
hot mess. And that had made me, that's what had steered me towards, I just want to go back on medication. I was like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be in a situation where I have a therapist like this ever again. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was like kind of down on doing cognitive behavioral therapy because of a bad experience that I had with a therapist. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I was. And I was like, Lord, I need someone who's going to help me, someone who's really going to help me, and someone who's not
Yeah.
going to coddle me, and someone who's not going
Mm-hmm.
to walk on eggshells around me.
Mm-hmm.
And the most
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable thing that he would do is not talk and
That's
just
not
look at me.
great. When I have clients in the past tell me, all I did was talk the whole session, I'm like, do what? You just talk the whole session? Like, you do talk most of the session, but they didn't give you any feedback? They was like, no. I'm like, oh my God, you just doing talk therapy. You're not doing the work. And they're like, no. And when you do the work, you make progress faster. And I've
Mhm.
also seen people who love the Lord and they're doing their work, they make progress even faster.
Mhm.
Because the Lord is walking with them, during that
Yeah,
journey. I know that's my story. My testimony is that I got better faster because God was with me and I invited him into the situation as I
right.
did my work. And it made it so much better. It was still hard now because
It was
God
hard.
corrects you too. He corrects you and tell you about yourself. And it don't
God is
feel
not
good.
afraid to hurt your feelings.
He's not. He's
He's
not.
not afraid to hurt your feelings.
Especially as you
It
mature in him, as you
means
mature
that
in
you're
Christ.
going to be,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Oh, I definitely,
It,
I
mean-
definitely
it
cried
means that
about my
you're
feelings
going to
being
be
hurt.
conformed to the image of his son, and that you're going to be the person that he
Hmm.
created you to be. God is not afraid to hurt your feelings.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so let me ask you this question. If it's just too personal, you don't have to answer the question. But earlier you mentioned that your anxiety had got so bad to the point where you wanted to harm yourself. And I
Mhm.
know many people deal with that. It gets so bad for them, they feel like that's the answer. And now I'm not sure if you know this or not. And I learned about this recently. It's like in some parts of the country or the world, people can opt to die if their mental health is not getting better. I also wanted to add that if you or a loved one are experiencing a crisis and are having thoughts of suicide, you can visit 988lifeline.org. You can also text them as well for support services. They are available 24/7, 7 days a week. Now, there are so many different sites you can visit that will provide you support for free in times of crisis. So be sure to remember to take care of yourself, engage in self-care. And as always, you can visit www.faithandmentalwellnessdirectory.faith to learn more about providers in your area. Our directory is continuing to grow, so if you know anyone who would be a great fit, please feel free to forward this site to them.
Insight, begin with the end in mind.
Okay.
So what I uncovered
Yeah.
during therapy was that the main thing that triggers
Mhm.
my anxiety disorder and ruminations and going off into la la land with my thoughts is unresolved grief
Mm.
and fear of abandonment.
Mm.
And of course, when someone who's close to you passes, that gives you a sense of abandonment.
Mm.
So the first time, like I was telling you about when I was in college, I I chose to go to college 12 hours away from my family. Thinking that it was, on my checklist of goals to go to this particular school and that was going to get me into a great law school. And I was trying to think down the road. I didn't realize how isolated that I was going to feel being that far away from home. And of course, this is in like the 90s. So we did not have cell phones. We barely had email. Um, so, if I called home and no one answered, it was like just a blow to my spirit. I had a boyfriend. If I called him and he didn't answer, it was just like, it just hurt me to my core. And there was one evening where my roommate was gone. And I started to feel the panic feeling where my heart was beating really fast. I couldn't calm down. I tried like drinking water. I tried like doing all kinds of stuff. I had been sick, like physically sick. I have really bad allergies. So I'd been sick and I was homesick. And so I tried calling my parents and nobody answered. I tried calling my sister and nobody answered. I tried calling my boyfriend and nobody answered. And I felt like I was completely alone and abandoned and all by myself. Most of the people in my dorm were like out partying. It was a weekend. Like there wasn't anybody there that I trusted to talk to. And I was just like, God, why would you like lead me here and then leave me here? And I felt really hopeless in that moment. So I had my allergy medication that if I took like the recommended dose, it would like knock me out. Like it like sleep. Like I'm already sensitive to medicine. And then if it's a medicine that actually causes drowsiness, it would. And so I looked at the bottle of pills and I was like, I'm gonna take a few of these. In that moment, I didn't want to not live anymore. I just didn't want to feel the pain that I was feeling anymore. I just wanted to like sleep for a really long time. And admittedly, I also was like, and if they can't wake me up, they're going to have to get in touch with my family and they're going to have to get in touch with the people who love me and they're going to have to come get me. And so I was sitting at my desk and I'm like, or looking at the pills. I poured the pills into my hands and like took a breath and I heard a song that I grew up with, like from a baby. He's That Kind of Friend by Tremaine Hawkins. I heard it like so clearly as if somebody was standing in the room next to me singing that song to me. And if you're familiar with the song starts, if you ever need a friend that sticks closer than any brother, I recommend Jesus.
Come on now.
Right? So that like pulled me out of that moment. That pulled me out of that moment of wanting to hurt myself, of wanting to just end the pain that I was experiencing in that moment. Then in about 4 years ago, in February, my grandfather passed away. He was my last living grandparent. And one of the things that I always wanted, because it happened for my brother and it happened for my sister, was for my kids to meet my grandparents. So my grandmother had passed away like 9 years before that. So I knew it was going to be my grandmother. My dad's dad passed away several years before my grandmother. So my granddaddy was like the last opportunity. I wasn't in like a relationship. I wasn't anywhere close to being married or having a kid or anything like that. But I just I was like, I want them to be able to get to know him like I had seen him with my youngest niece, like in his like interactions with her. And it was just so sweet and so cute. And I just wanted them to be able to have for however long, just a little bit of that relationship with him because I was really close to him. And so when he passed away, all of those feelings came flooding in of how could you have possibly messed up so bad with the choices that you made in your life that your grandfather didn't get to meet your children. Like, this is your fault. You made bad choice after bad choice after bad choice that led to broken relationship after broken relationship. You knew better. You didn't choose better. And now he'll never meet your kids. And so that train of thought had me in a thought spiral of literally every mistake that I had ever made, which led me to a place of how can anybody ever love me? How can God even love me? Because I've broken his heart so many times. So in that time period, I did want to go away. I wanted to be gone. I didn't want to live anymore. I'm so grateful because this all happened in a very short amount of time, but my sister was with me. And I think, and honestly, we've not actually talked about it, but because of her background as a social worker and a mental health counselor, I think she saw the light go out of my eyes. And she knew she couldn't leave me by myself. And because she was there and because she stayed with me, I didn't do anything. And I was able to get to a place where I could pray and get to some sense of peace. And a lot of that happened internally, and I did not talk to anybody about it because I had my mother who had lost her father. And I was being told, you got to be strong for your mom. So rather than dealing with all of that, I pushed it down and pushed it down and pushed it down. Then COVID happened. That led to more isolation. My family got COVID around the holidays in 2020, so we didn't get to spend the holidays with each other until like later. We were like doing a Zoom call with each other on Christmas Day, which I've only not spent. There's only been one Christmas that I didn't spend with my family up until that point. So I pushed it down, pushed it down. The next year, another lady that I was really close to, who was like a surrogate grandmother to me, she passed away. And we couldn't go see her because of COVID, and she was in a nursing home. And I had talked to her like 2 days before she passed away, and she was crying to me about how alone she was. In her, I saw a future that scared the living daylights out of me because she had no children of her own. And she was depending on like nieces and nephews, and then she was placed into a nursing home, and people weren't going to see her as often as I would have liked them to go see her. And then I was like, Lord, are you going to leave me here on this planet to be by myself without a spouse, without kids? Am I going to be 95 years old with no one willing to come visit me? Like, those intrusive thoughts started invading us. And so I was dealing with that thought pattern. And instead of actually dealing with it head on, like I said, I tried to do therapy, but that therapist at that time was not a good experience. And so again, I just kept like doing more things, trying to be more active, trying to push away the thoughts, rather than dealing with them. And that's how I ended up where I wasn't sleeping, and I was dealing with insomnia for about a year and a half, to the point where I even did a sleep study to try to figure out if I had like sleep apnea or something, like what was causing me to be so exhausted and so tired.
All
And what was causing, and
anxiety.
you mentioned it earlier, it was all anxiety, and it
Mhm.
was unresolved grief.
Yeah.
It was grief that I hadn't dealt with. And I didn't realize that until I actually started talking to my therapist instead of having stare downs with him. Like, are you going to say something? Because I'm not saying anything. Like, I don't want to talk about this because I don't like the thoughts that are in my head. But he made me sit in my feelings, and he made me talk about my feelings, and he made me notice my feelings and notice what I was experiencing and how I operated in those things. And showed me the good things about how I operated, and the good that could come from the fact that I have to have an explanation for everything. And that if I can come up with an explanation for something, that combats anxiety for me. Like, if I don't have a way of explaining something, it causes me to ruminate. If I can come up with an explanation, oh, this is why this happened, then it stops that cycle. And I was just sitting there thinking like, oh, it's bad that I need to have an explanation for everything. I should just go with the flow. I should just like let things be what they are. And he was like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying now that you know that that's what you need, you see when you do come up with an explanation for something that it calms you down. It gives you peace, and you're not on that thought spiral with that thing. So the things that I learned in the work that I did was, one, to actually listen to my anxiety, which I had ignored and avoided for a very long time. Like, I was like, I don't want to be thinking these thoughts. I definitely don't want to think about these thoughts. I don't want to be thinking. Like,
Yes, I get
like,
what you're saying. Yes, yes.
but when I listened to what my brain was actually putting forth, I realized how ridiculous the scenarios I was coming up with. And like you mentioned earlier, like how unlikely these things are, so unlikely to happen. Could they happen?
Yes, yes,
But
yes,
it is highly unlikely that the doomsday scenario you are coming up with is
yes.
going to actually happen and
Mhm.
come true, which is not to say that, I've thought that bad things were going to happen, and I've had bad things happen. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have like the thoughts to build off of. But they've never been the things that my brain came up with. Like, my brain is like somewhere all the way over there with catastrophic thoughts. So once I actually listened to my anxiety, like actually listened to the thoughts that were coming into my head, like, this is ridiculous. Like, why are you lying all the time? Like, this is not, there is little to no chance that this is ever going to happen. But in listening to that, the next thing I learned was that you have to learn from your anxiety. Like, there's a reason you're anxious. So once you listen to your anxiety, okay, yes, your anxiety is telling you this. Why? What is it indicating? Because it's a feeling, and feelings are indicators. Feelings are telling you that something is going on behind the scenes. That's where I learned, like, okay, I don't think I gave myself the space to grieve my grandfather. My love language is physical touch.
Mm.
And conversely, my toxic trait, so to speak, is avoidance.
Mm.
So,
They don't go well together. They don't.
so when things get too heavy, like I thought it was isolation. My sister was like, no, you're avoidance. Because because when you get, when you feel the pressure, you just don't deal with things.
Yeah.
When you get stressed out, I don't deal with confrontation. I avoid confrontation. I
Yeah.
avoid, and so
Yeah.
I do, my dad was in the Navy. We moved around a lot. And so my family is my friends. Like, I
Mhm.
have my best friend who's been my best friend for 20 plus years, but like
Mhm.
my family is my friends.
Mm.
Because we weren't in a situation long enough when I was coming up for
Mm.
me to have like outside friends. And so
Mhm.
our bond is like super close, which is like such a blessing.
Yeah.
But as we've grown older, as our parents have grown older, as my nieces and nephews have grown older, they're starting to bud and have their, their own lives, and they don't need TT as much. And, so there's that feeling of like that super tight thing. It's like
Yeah.
starting to, and so
Well,
we did talk about that when I was
good.
in
I want to ask
therapy. Yeah.
you, do y'all talk
Yes.
about that? Hey,
We
listen,
did talk about
ATT still
that.
needs some love, okay?
Yes. Like me and my therapist did talk about that, because I was like,
Good,
I think I'm
good.
just feeling like I'm starting to
Yeah.
feel left out. And that's where we got to, like,
Mhm.
it's the fear of abandonment and the fear of being
Yes.
isolated and kind of like grieving the relationships that I had with them when they were younger, but I mean, obviously they're thriving and they're doing amazing, and I want that for them,
But you just miss
So
them.
I just
Yeah.
miss some.
Yeah. That's normal. So with that being said, do you have anything else that you want to share with the audience in reference to generalized anxiety disorder? Any
I
tips?
always want to share with people, you are not alone.
Yeah.
Okay. If you are experiencing any of these symptoms or other symptoms that may stem from a mental health issue, you are not alone. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many people out there that are suffering in silence
Mm-hmm.
because they're afraid of a stigma, because they're afraid that
Mm-hmm.
people won't understand,
Mm-hmm.
because they are people of faith, and they feel like it just means that they're not praying hard
Mm-hmm.
enough, that their faith isn't strong enough.
Yeah.
And so they keep it to themselves because they're
Mm-hmm.
embarrassed. There is help. There are people who are willing to help you through this.
Mm-hmm.
There are therapists that you can find, and don't just settle for like the first person that you find. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
you have the ability through whatever healthcare options you have to vet a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I knew, like I said, on that first day when he was like, I'm not going to get rid of the parts of you that you hate and send you on your way. We're going
Yeah.
to work our ways through this. And when
Yeah.
he like head me off at the pass and like was like, this is not going to be like a series of coddling sessions, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's the one for me, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't need someone in my life who's going to walk on eggshells around me. I have had enough of that throughout my life of
Right.
people that are like,
Exactly.
she's gonna break, so we have to be gentle with her. I did not want anybody
Exactly.
who was going to be gentle with me. So if you have the ability
Mm-hmm.
to, go, if you go to a therapist and it doesn't feel right, try to find another one.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say too
Um,
that just because they're Christian too doesn't mean they're a good fit for you. Because I've had clients who come, they say you're a Christian, but sometimes they might have things that I'm not, well versed in. Like, I'll tell them like, for me, I don't treat pornography addictions, but I know how to connect you to the right people to be able to
mhm,
help you to get the help that you need. So just because they're Christian or because y'all the same color or because,
right.
whatever things you have in your head about what a therapist should be for you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a great fit. I had
Because
therapists
my
who,
therapist
right,
definitely did not look like me. He was a
right, mine
man,
didn't either. Me
he was
neither.
white, and he was Jewish.
Can you share with us a little bit more about your services, your ministry, and what you do?
So I am a singer-songwriter, and I write mainly Christian music. I also do some music in the pop and sync
Mm-hmm.
space, so writing for like commercials and television.
Oh, that's nice.
I also
Oh.
I sing, yeah. I also I sing. I'm getting into gigging. So
Okay.
like last week, the days are going by so fast. This year, 2 weeks ago, I sang at a friend's wedding. So I'm available to sing, to book to speak, um, at different events. And yeah, I'm just trying to, like I said, get the message out there. I'm a speaker, I'm a
Yeah.
singer, I'm an author.
Okay.
I wrote a book called Pray While You Pray, which is for my Christian single ladies, to get us refocused back on our relationship with Christ, and not so
Mm-hmm.
much focused on when that relationship with the man is coming, but building a life that you love and being
Mm-hmm.
a person that you would love to be in love with, you know, like becoming the person that you want to attract.
Yeah.
And then I have a devotional that goes with that. That devotional is also on YouVersion Bible app. And I have the Don't You Worry devotional and journal that goes along with the song Don't You Worry. There's two versions of Don't You Worry, the original and the dance remix. Because I am a firm believer. That's another thing I do. I dance it out. And if anybody was looking in my window, they would think that I was a nutball. But sometimes when I get really stressed out, I will crank music up really loud and I will just like dance around my house. I am like the best kitchen choreographer you have ever met. So since I like to dance it out, I wanted to make a song that people could dance to. But every song on my EP is actually written because of a mental health issue that I was going through, be it anxiety, depression, identity issues, just trying to refocus myself on gratitude and trying to just overcome and come out of dark places. It's all there in song.
Where can they find you on social media?
On social media, I'm at Toni LaShawn Music on Instagram and at Toni LaShawn Christian Music on Facebook. And I'm also on Twitter X as T LaShawn Music. I can't just call it X. I'm sorry, it's just weird. I have a YouTube channel as well. My music is on all the different streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Pandora, all of that. And then I have devotions for all of the songs that are in the YouVersion Bible app as well. So
yeah. Well, thank you so much for gracing us with your story and being so transparent and being so vulnerable, because that is not easy to share your personal business with the world. And so again, thank you so much for coming on. You guys be sure to go look in the description box. All her links will be there to check out all her amazing ministry and services. Okay. Thanks again, you guys.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you again for being a part of the Faith and Mental Wellness podcast community. Don't forget to visit www.faithandmentalwellness.fave to learn more about our directory, our virtual meetups that we have bi-monthly for healthcare professionals, and to also learn more about our trainings and other resources. Thank you again for being here, and we'll talk to you guys next time.